What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Poop Sock. As always, I am your host, Zach Cronin, and today we are going to be talking about the worst team in the NBA and potentially the worst team in the history of the NBA, and that is the Detroit Pistons. At the time of this recording, the Pistons are a staggering 2-19. They are the worst team in the NBA in terms of both wins and winning percentage. They've also currently lost 18 straight basketball games.
Bruh.
18 straight. They have not won a basketball game since October 28th, and the upcoming schedule for them does not look that promising. For context, they are 8 games away from tying the longest losing streak in NBA history, which is 26 games. Their next games are against Orlando, Indiana, Philly again, Milwaukee, and then Atlanta. After Atlanta, they play Utah, but then they play back to back games against the Brooklyn Nets. It is very likely that we see them set a new record for futility, but I'm not here to simply dunk on the Detroit Pistons. I am approaching this video from a kind of like, how the fuck did we get here moment? Because there's a difference between being bad and being historically bad. Like, I don't even think that bad appropriately describes Detroit right now. I'm looking more like horrific. They're like offensively bad, actually. What makes their futility more intriguing is that on paper, like, I don't think that this team should be as bad as they are. As I already mentioned, they're 2-19, which gives them a winning percentage of 0.095, less than 10%. Well, I mean, obviously that way it's presented as less than 10%, but 9.5%. That is, again, on pace to be the worst mark in NBA history. This is a epic catastrophe. Like, I'm trying to think of a proper way to describe this. This is like, this might actually be worse than when Fergie sang the national anthem. I do want to preface this video by saying that the Pistons should not be a good team. Like, they shouldn't project to be good. But I think that it is appropriate to believe that they should be better than this. Their over under coming into this season, courtesy of FanDuel, was 27 and a half wins, which was like the second or third worst mark in the NBA. They were the same amount as the Portland Trailblazers. They were just below the San Antonio Spurs, and they were above the Washington Wizards. And again, like, this team has just been considerably worse than all of them, with the exception of maybe San Antonio, who has the worst net rating in the league. I do, of course, want to mention the fact that I am not a Pistons fan, and I don't want to come off as like I am an expert for this team. I did a little bit of digging before the video, and this, of course, led me to the Pistons subreddit, where a lot of the fans were basically just like front office incompetence, which, of course, generally goes with any bad team, and just, I don't know if it's like poor roster construction or just like incompetent roster construction, but I think the roster construction is probably the leading cause, which again is very odd because this team has Cade Cunningham, this team has Isaiah Stewart, this team has Asar Thompson and Jalen Duren. When you look at this roster compared to the Bobcats roster from 2011 2010, like, in terms of talent, the Pistons should be better than this team. I mean, like, yeah, Corey Maggette, good player, averaged 28 points per 100 possessions. But even when you do equate for volume, or for pace rather, the Pistons have considerably more playmakers and more weapons than that team. You're gonna tell me that Corey Maggette, Gerald Henderson, and a 21-year-old Kemba Walker are better than Cade Cunningham, Asar Thompson, Jalen Duren, and even Bojan Bogdanovic, whom we will get to in a second. Like, I'm just simply not buying it. Some quick metrics right here. This team is 28th in scoring volume, 27th in scoring volume, pardon me, 27th in offensive efficiency. They are 24th in 3-point percentage, 24th in 2-point percentage. This team really does not do anything well outside of assisting, which is mostly the result of Cade Cunningham. Now, I think that we need to talk about Cade Cunningham, who obviously is the centerpiece for this team and has performed relatively well. throughout the course of this season. He's averaging 22 points. He's averaging about 7.5 assists. He's shooting 34% from three, which again, not great, but is a considerable improvement from last year and his rookie year. Like, he is making strides and becoming a much better player, which is great to see. There is, of course, also Jalen Duren and Asar Thompson, who I've mentioned twice already. You look at Jalen Duren, guys averaging 11 rebounds, 1.5 blocks. Asar Thompson is at like damn near 9 rebounds, 1.5 blocks, 1 steals. These guys are producing. You then, of course, have Bojan Bogdanovic, who just came back from his injury, and he's already looking like arguably the Pistons' best player. I don't want to say that, but you look at him, and he's performing like one of their better options. He's already at 22 points per game. Granted, he's only played 2 games, but shooting 39% from three. Like, this guy returned from injury and looks like a competent player because he is a competent player. Granted, not like an all-star caliber player, not, someone whom you want to build your team around. He's also a little bit older, but he provides things that this team needs in terms of three-point shooting and also a veteran presence in the locker room. However, outside of that, I also do want to touch on Isaiah Stewart, who is playing spectacular basketball as well, shooting 37% from three, averaging 7 rebounds, 11 points. Like, those four guys going forward, the Pistons have a, dare I say, great young core to build around. You combine that with the fact that they have Monty Williams, who is an incredibly talented head coach, and it's just not panning out. You look at those five people, the four young guys plus Monty Williams, and you think to yourself, like, this team should be at least like 6 or 8 wins, somewhere around there, and they're just not. I think that the Pistons fans are right. The rest of this roster is just like ass, straight up. They do not have many great players outside of the five guys I just talked about. Killian Hayes has not panned out at all. Joe Harris has played in 7 games, just looks like a shell of himself. Marvin Bagley's played in 19 games, averaging like 18 minutes a night, just does not contribute anything to this team. They just don't have anybody else on this roster who is going to contribute to winning basketball. A lot of the times you'll take on players like Joe Harris, or you'll take on a player like James Wiseman for different reasons. Like Joe Harris, you bring on, sometimes, you bring on a bad contract if you can get a pick, but the Pistons acquired Joe Harris and they got cash and a second round pick for 2027 and a second round pick for 2029. What's the point of making that trade? Obviously, it looks worse now because Harris is not playing up to the level that we had seen previously with him in Brooklyn. But yes, front office incompetence is just, it is the ultimate killer for organizations. Of course, it all makes it worse because, like, all of these guys are traffic cones on defense. Even Cade, who has, improved himself defensively, is still not, I don't even know if I would consider him an average defender. I'm going to be honest. I'm not really too familiar with his defensive game, but if you look at a stat like defensive box plus minus, he's at minus 2.8. Just not great performances on that end. Another guy I didn't mention is Monte Morris. Monte Morris hasn't played a single game for them yet this season. He's dealing with some sort of quad injury, and he is a guy who could breathe some additional life into this team were he to be healthy. I mean, you look at what he did with the Wizards and Denver, consistently shooting 38, 39, 40% from three, a very reliable facilitator as well, which is what a young team could use every now and then. Just have a veteran presence, bring the ball up, settle the offense, corral everybody, bark out a set for them to execute. But like at this rate, you would need a superstar level performance from Cade Cunningham to rescue this team. I know that we probably shouldn't be drawing conclusions about anybody really prior to Christmas or even, like prior to Thanksgiving, because that is like, at least Christmas is, the unofficial start of the NBA season. But by the time you get to Christmas, the season is already like a third of the way over, closer to 40% of the way done. What teams look like heading into Christmas is generally what they're going to look like. The only exception are teams that have, star players that are hurt. Like if Kawhi were hurt or if Giannis were dealing with something, then you wouldn't really be able to draw an accurate conclusion about the Clippers or the Bucks. But when you have a team that is young and you have a team that is mid at best, and to say the Pistons are mid at best is a stretch, you kind of already can gather what this team is going to look like by the time Thanksgiving rolls around. And I don't foresee anything changing, especially when you consider the fact that Detroit has the toughest remaining schedule. Dude, look at these poor bastards. They have to play the Timberwolves twice, the Celtics three times, Bucks three times, the Sixers three times, the Thunder once, and the Magic four. It is only going to get worse for this organization and for this team for this season. Now, I obviously recognize that this is not the type of conversation that you want to be having, especially when you consider the fact that this team was better last season, significantly better, and they didn't have Cade Cunningham. And now they're on pace to finish with 10 fewer wins, and they only had 17 last season. And it doesn't make any sense. We are going to study this team years down the line because I don't have any confidence in them really being able to turn this around. I think that they could maybe win, 10 to 12 games this season, but if your team is losing 18 straight in November, there's very little you can do to bring it around. It's not a systematic or a schematic thing that you can change to make this team better. It is a philosophical, it is an organizational rework that has to happen. Like there has to be a concerted effort in the front office to figure out how to best maximize this team and then to also include the coaching staff in those conversations. And then as the front office people, as the GM, as the president of basketball operations, you have to go out and make these necessary changes to improve this team. Fortunately, the Pistons are in a position as to, they have this shitty season, but at least they have a foundation in place. Like, I don't want that to get lost in the shuffle. Like Asar Thompson, Jalen Duren, Cade Cunningham, Isaiah Stewart. That is a very, very good foundation to build around going forward. You just have to make sure that, of course, the organizational competence is there. With that, I think I'm going to go ahead and close this video out. Thank you guys so very much for coming to hang out with me. As always, everything I'm associated with is down in the description box below. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content just like this. Leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it. Drop a comment as well. It really helps out with the algorithm. And with that, I'll see you all in the next one.